Hey everyone, it's Synth Designer back again with another video. Today I am going to be going through what I consider to be 15 essential sounds that every producer should know. All of these sounds are from an upcoming preset pack called Dreamscape Sounds, and I kind of wanted to show it off and like the versatility of it. This preset pack will be made available for free on my website at synthdesigner.com in December of 2024. So if you're watching earlier than that, just know that you could get early access if you sign up to my Patreon page for only a couple dollars a month. Otherwise, you just have to wait and this will be all available. Now, all of these sounds are actually pretty simple to create, but I want to show you that these are all really important to all sorts of genres in electronic music, no matter what you like, whether it's EDM, more lo-fi, low-key stuff. It could be used in all sorts of different ways. And this is for producers of all levels. Now, I'm not saying these are the most complicated sounds, but I'll show you that they're really versatile and they can be used in a lot of contexts. And I think you'll recognize a lot of the sounds yourself. So why don't we get started right away and go into the first sound, which is what I call a Sine Pluck. As you can see, it's just a very plucky sine wave. So it sounds a bit like this. So as you can imagine, early to mid 2010s kind of pop music used these sounds a lot, and these are really popular for leads. These could also be used as chords, as you can see in this example here with these quick chords I created. And it's a really simple sound to create here. As you can see, a sine wave here, another one on the sub, an octave up. And this is just to create a little bit of variation here, as you can hear. It's just to kind of give them a little bit of separation and interesting kind of element to it. You can see very plucky envelope here. That's about it. You can also, if you wanted to, create a second envelope similar to this one, and then attach it to your filter cutoff, adding a little bit of that transience to it. There's also a little bit of noise here that you can hear. That adds just a little bit of the texture as well. In the effects, I added a compressor here, a little bit of distortion, this downsample distortion. It adds just a little bit of that kind of higher pitch to it, as well as some delay and reverb. So it's a really simple sound, but an effective one that has been used in a lot of different songs over the years. This next sound I call muted to bright saw pluck. And the reason I call it that is because I have it on a default setting of a kind of mellow kind of pluck. Let's just listen to it. But then I have this mod wheel here that can open things up a lot. This is just a classic basic sound from a lot of EDM music over the years. As you can see, very simple kind of saw setup here with a few voices of unison, and then a plucky envelope again that opens up the cutoff on every pluck. Very simply, a little bit of reverb, and then not a whole lot of other things. But as you can see here, and you'll hear in a second, opening up this mod wheel really adds a lot to the sound, and it's opening up this cutoff here, as well as opening up the decay of the first envelope, which you'll hear kind of just fills out the sound a little bit more. So I have this basic chord setup here. Now let's just listen and you'll be able to kind of really pick up on how this has been used in so many EDM songs over the years. This next sound is called the Detuned Saw, and it sounds a bit like this. really popular in a lot of EDM tracks, lots of techno. Basically, you can name any kind of EDM and this is used. And this is a little bit like the Super Saw, but of course, higher on the detune meter here, and with 7 voice of unison here, you can take down the cutoff a little bit if you want. And it works great in a lot of different contexts. As you can see here, the first envelope here is what's the most important, and it's got a kind of keys type of look to it, which means that it's not at a full sustain, it's got that nice release. So it's just got that nice kind of like tail to it. Just basic reverb and delay. Let's just pair this with the last sound we created and see how that sounds. This next sound I call the Wobble Pad. As you can imagine, it has a bit of a wobble to it, so let's hear it. Very simply again, a basic saw wave, 7 voice of unison here. The envelope hasn't changed at all, but the LFOs is what kind of gives it that kind of wobble sound. Number 1, I did some detuning here on the fine tune, and then on the cutoff here, it essentially lowers and is on an endless loop here. You can change things from BPM if you want to not BPM, depending on what your context is. But it's got that nice kind of just almost sidechain feel to it. Again, let's just pair it up with the last or the first sound that we created here and see how it sounds. This sound here I call the Sine Saw Pad. Pretty self-explanatory once again, a sine wave and a saw. Now, the thing about pairing these together is that they're essentially diametrically opposed. The saw wave is that really harsh type of sound, and the sine wave is that very fundamental and basic sound. But I think that the two really complement each other really well in a pad, and let's just hear it. As you can see, both have the same amount of unison. I took this saw level down a little bit just because I wanted the sine to come through a little bit more. The saw has that harsher quality, which makes it louder, and therefore you kind of need to take it down a bit. Effects, again, subtle reverb, but again, we don't need too much. Let's play it in context with the other two patterns now, and let's see how that sounds. This sound is about as simple as it gets. It's called the simplest pad. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is just lazy, but in reality, this works in a lot of different contexts and has been used in tons of different songs to open things up in a song. And by that I mean introduce it. Now here's how it sounds. The key part of this is it's straight up the middle with its 1 voice of unison and no effects. Now, you might be thinking again, okay, this is pointless, but let's just put it into the context of the mix that we've been creating and let's see how it works. Now that we have the sound kind of set up, what if you wanted to change kind of one of those pads, especially the Sine Saw Pad, to something a little bit more airy like this? This Airy Pad introduces a lot of kind of ethereal type of quality to the sound. You can also, again, tone this back a little bit. Let's add this into the context. First, taking a look at it, simple again, saw pad again with some detunement. Nothing going on with the envelope. The effects is where it really comes in, adding some chorus, a lot of delay, and a lot of reverb. Taking out some of these lows really helps it become a little bit of that airy sound, because if we kept in all the lows, just adds a little bit of that lightness to it. You could also bump up some of the gain on the higher end to give it a little bit more of that airy quality. Let's see, now that we've replaced pattern 4 here with this airy quality, see how that makes a difference. Another alternative is this delayed pad. Now this one adds a little bit of rhythm again to your song, so you'd have to kind of pick and choose where you want this, but let's just hear it. As you can hear, it has a lot of that delay to it, which gives it that characteristic. The other thing is it has kind of that short kind of pluck to it. Despite it sustaining with the first envelope, the second envelope, you can see, opens up the cutoff and closes. It's an MB saw here with 9 voice of unison. Again, just delay and reverb. The delay is obviously what gives it that effect. Most importantly, it's a dotted 8th note effect here. So let's play into context again, into our song. This next sound is a very common sound heard in a lot of different contexts. I really can't even mention how many. It's called the basic bell, and it sounds a bit like this. So it's got that kind of bell-like sound created with just a basic sine wave here and a couple of other effects here. As you can see, just a bit of reverb and taking out some of those lows. As you can see here, it's just a very basic envelope. It's really nothing too crazy here, but it's really effective and has that nice mellow sound. You can really even add a lot more reverb. And it creates really a nice kind of ambient effect to it. This next sound is basically the opposite of what we just had, and it's called the Squelch Saw Lead. Now it sounds like this. It's really got that harsh upper harmonic quality created by this saw wave here, and the second envelope opens it way up and creates that kind of squelchy type of sound to it, which is essentially a large opening of the cutoff to kind of give it that higher kind of resonant quality. You could even up the resonance, give it kind of that Daft Punk type of sound. It has no other effects other than a basic delay and reverb, but that's all you need in this case. You could even think about adding some compression to take it over the top, but I didn't add that in this case. This next sound here is basically a variation on that second sound that we had, and the first pattern that we had on our playlist here. It sounds a bit like this. And this one is a little bit more mono. Now, the reason why it's kind of a lead and called the Plucky Saw Lead is because of that mono quality. And again, this cutoff here is really what determines kind of its timbre and its quality that you want. And we can very easily substitute that first pattern here. So if we go back to pattern 1, and instead of this sound, we can substitute it for this sound. As you can see, only some reverb here, but it has that different effect because of that mono sound, as well as this plucky envelope here opening it up. Whereas this one doesn't have the same opening. Doesn't open in the same manner, even though the envelope is plucky here. It's not the same amount of opening here. But as you can see, these two sounds are very similar, but have a little bit of a difference here. Now this sound is called the Daft Lead, and as I just mentioned in a couple sounds ago, that this is very much created by this resonance here. So let's listen. The sound really relies on this resonance here. Simple saw wave, simple envelopes here. The envelope really opens it up. I have some hyper and some light distortion here. Some compression and reverb as well. But this resonance is really what gives it that sound. If I were to turn it down, that's really what gives it that kind of Daft Punk sound. This next sound is called Analog Model Keys, and as you can imagine, this is modeled after just some analog keys. It's got a little bit of that kind of cool analog vibe to it, and it's very simple. A little bit of chorus and a little bit of reverb here, some EQ cutting out the lows, and again, a simple envelope here, just opening up the cutoff. Again, you can turn down the cutoff here. It's got that nice kind of cool sound to it. Again, let's place it into context here into our mix that we had coming in here with pattern 6. You'll notice it gives it a nice kind of transient quality to it. Of course, no song is complete without some basses, and I'm going to show you a couple bass sounds here. And this is the wide sustained saw bass, and it sounds a bit like this. So very similar to a Reese bass here. It has the sub here and the Os A both being saw waves. This one having the 5 voice of unison, both of them 2 octaves down. That gives it that nice sound, some compression, and a little bit of chorus too. Let's put this into our context here, and let's just tweak this cutoff here and maybe open it up a little bit as well. Let's play things through and see how things shape up here. Now this last sound is just called the basic square, and it's a bit of an alternative to the last bass sound. Where the last one was sustained, this one is a plucky sound and sounds a bit like this. And so as you can see, it's two squares, but with a sub here of a sine wave here, which is on a direct out. And as you can see here, the EQ here is taking out some of the sub bass from the squares because the sub is on the direct out here. And that creates just that nice sine wave on the bottom end, and the top end is these squares here. So the second envelope is what opens it up. And putting into context into our mix again, let's take a look here and just compare it to the last one, where this one is not as sustained, but plucky. So there you have it. Those are 15 essential sounds I think every producer should know. This list is by no means exhaustive, but I thought it'd be kind of a fun look at what I consider to be really essential sounds to all of electronic music, no matter what genre you're in. Again, this is coming up in a preset pack for Serum called Dreamscape Sounds. It's going to be my biggest preset pack yet. It's going to feature 50 unique sounds, and it's for producers of all levels, for all genres. Let me know what you think of this video and the sounds that I created here. Do you think they're essential? What are some of your essential sounds that you use in your music? Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.